People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But who looks inside awakes.
Wow. That's heavy right out of the gate.
Right. It's a quote from the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. And, I mean, it really brings up this fascinating, maybe slightly terrifying question for anyone who has ever sat on a therapy couch.
Oh, absolutely.
Have you ever wondered what the person sitting across from you is actually thinking? Like they're nodding compassionately, they're taking notes while you pour out your deepest, darkest secrets. But what is going on in their head?
I think everyone wonders that. You assume they have it all figured out.
Exactly. And even more profoundly, what happens when the person whose entire professional life is dedicated to fixing everyone else's problems realizes their own life is just completely falling apart?
It totally shatters that grand illusion, right? That illusion of the infallible expert.
Yeah, totally.
Because we have this societal tendency to put mental health professionals on a pedestal. We just assume that because they possess the map to the human mind, they somehow never get lost in the woods themselves.
Which is so unfair to them, honestly.
It really is. But taking away that clinical veil reveals a profoundly comforting truth, I think. The people helping us navigate our minds are often wrestling with the exact same demons.
Well said. Welcome to the Book Nook, everyone. Today, our mission on this deep dive is to decode the brilliant, hilarious, and honestly, often gut-wrenching psychological insights from Lori Gottlieb's memoir.
Such a good book. Maybe you should talk to someone.
Yes, maybe you should talk to someone. Gottlieb is a highly trained clinical therapist in Los Angeles who, after a sudden and just blindsiding breakup, experiences a total psychological collapse.
Just a complete meltdown.
A total meltdown. And to cope, she ends up on the couch of this quirky, cardigan-wearing therapist named Wendell.
Wendell's the best.
He really is. So we're going to use her dual journey as both the clinician analyzing her patients and the patient crying on Wendell's couch to examine the exact mechanisms of how we change, how our brains hide the truth from us, and, how we actually heal.
It's going to be a fascinating deep dive.
So to kick this off, we have to start at the absolute beginning of any therapeutic relationship. The very first thing a patient says when they walk in the door, the presenting problem.
Right. So the presenting problem is basically the stated reason a person picks up the phone to schedule an appointment.
The catalyst.
Exactly. It's the immediate catalyst. It could be a breakup or maybe getting fired or a sudden onset of panic attacks or honestly just a vague, suffocating feeling of being stuck.
Which is so common.
Extremely common.
Yeah.
But here is the secret of the trade. Therapists know, almost universally, that the presenting problem is a red herring.
Really? Like always?
Almost always. It is rarely the actual root cause of the patient's suffering.
That makes me think of like the check engine light on a car dashboard.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Yeah. Right, because you drive into the mechanic shock specifically because that little glowing yellow light is driving you crazy.
And you just want them to turn it off.
Exactly. You just want the mechanic to turn the light off. But that light isn't the actual problem, is it? It's just the surface level warning system for like the transmission that is completely failing underneath the hood.
Yeah, the light is just doing its job.
So you don't fix the car by smashing the dashboard light with a hammer. You have to actually lift the hood.
I want to dig into the mechanics of that analogy because it perfectly illustrates how psychological defense mechanisms operate.
Okay, let's lift the hood on the brain then.
Right. So a defense mechanism isn't just a metaphor. It's a very real cognitive function.
Like a biological thing.
Yes, exactly. When the human brain encounters an emotional truth that feels genuinely unsurvivable, like maybe deep-seated inadequacy or the terror of abandonment or unresolved grief, the psyche perceives that truth as a literal mortal threat.
Wow.
It triggers the exact same biological alarm systems as a physical predator would.
So it's like a bear is chasing you, but the bear is your own trauma.
Precisely. So the brain brilliantly diverts your cognitive resources away from the unbearable truth, the failing transmission, and hyper-focuses your attention on a manageable external annoyance, the check engine light.
That is so wild.
The presenting problem is essentially a safe, socially acceptable entry point. It allows the patient to enter the room and ask for help without instantly shattering.
Okay, let's apply that directly to Lori's own check engine light in the book. Her presenting problem is a man she simply refers to as boyfriend.
Boyfriend, capital B.
Capital B. And this is a guy who, by all accounts, was the absolute pinnacle of partner material.
He really sounded amazing on paper.
I mean, we're talking about a man who would go on Costco runs and bring her back like 20 jugs of maple syrup for the waffles he made her from scratch.
20 jugs. Who has the pantry space?
I know. But he rubbed her back during Netflix binges, he left love notes around the house, and most importantly, he loved her family.
Right, they were planning to get married.
Yeah, they were ring shopping.
Yeah.
And then, completely out of nowhere, the alarm bells go off.
Yeah, it's a brutal scene. They were just lying in bed one evening, casually discussing movie tickets for the upcoming weekend, and boyfriend goes eerily quiet.
Oh, I hate that kind of quiet.
It is that highly specific, dense frequency of silence that only a long-term partner can really detect, you know?
Mhm.
It's the silence where the oxygen suddenly just leaves the room.
So Lori asks him what's wrong, assuming maybe he had a bad day at work or something, and he drops a nuclear bomb on her life.
Out of nowhere.
He just casually announces, I've decided that I can't live with a kid under my roof for the next 10 years.
Just devastating.
And for context, Lori has an 8-year-old son from before they met. Boyfriend has older teenagers who are just about to leave for college. And he basically admits that he doesn't want to wake up on a Saturday morning and look at her son's Legos on the living room floor.
He just wants his freedom.
Yeah, he just wants to drink his coffee and read the newspaper in total peace.
The cognitive dissonance of that moment for Lori is just staggering. She goes into immediate shock.
Because how could she not?
Right. The brain cannot reconcile the man who buys 20 jugs of syrup with the man who is coldly discarding her over Legos.
It doesn't compute.
Exactly. So she cycles through the initial stages of grief at breakneck speed. First, denial. I mean, she genuinely laughs,
Yes.
assuming it's a bizarre joke.
Which is such a natural reaction.
Totally. And when she realizes it isn't, the panic sets in. She moves to bargaining. She's like offering to take on a disproportionate amount of childcare, so boyfriend never has to be inconvenienced by her son.
She's pleading with him.
But he is entirely rigid. The relationship is just over.
Which forces Lori to confront a brutal reality, one she eventually sums up with this brilliant, blunt catchphrase she actually uses with her own patients. She says, if the queen had balls, she'd be the king.
It sounds kind of crass, but the psychological implication is profound.
It really is. It basically means if you spend your life refusing to accept the reality of a situation and constantly wishing for impossible conditions, you actively deprive yourself of joy.
Yeah, boyfriend wants Lori, but he absolutely does not want her child.
And you cannot order a life partner a la carte.
No, you can't.
But here's what I find fascinating. Lori is a trained therapist, right? She comes into Wendell's office and she is absolutely laser focused on the presenting problem.
Check engine light.
Yes. She wants to spend her entire session talking about how boyfriend is a sociopath, how he's a narcissist, how he led her on. She wants Wendell to just validate her outrage.
And that is exactly what a therapist cannot do.
Wait, really? Why not?
Because if Wendell just agrees with her presenting narrative, if he says, yeah, you're right, he's a monster, he is effectively colluding with her defense mechanism.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
The anger at boyfriend is shielding her from a much deeper, more terrifying grief about her own life. You know, her aging, her fears of being alone.
Which perfectly mirrors another patient in the book, John.
Oh, John.
John is a highly successful 40-something television producer in Hollywood, and his presenting problem. The entire world is populated by idiots.
Just surrounded by them in his mind.
Right. John comes into therapy complaining that he has chronic insomnia, he's constantly fighting with his wife Margot, and he just needs Lori to help him, quote, manage the idiots.
John's complaints are simultaneously hilarious and just deeply exhausting.
They really are.
He spends his sessions raging about the Apple genius who couldn't immediately fix his laptop, or the driver who stops at a yellow light because they have no sense of urgency.
Or the dental hygienist.
Yes, the dental hygienist who has the audacity to ask non-rhetorical questions while her hands are inside his mouth.
Which, okay, I kind of relate to that one. But think about the last time you, as a listener, lost your mind at a customer service rep or a slow driver.
Right. Were you genuinely that angry at the driver?
Exactly. Or were you using that explosive anger to mask a terrifying lack of control in your own life? Because John's defenses are a literal fortress.
A fortress with a moat.
Yeah. He explicitly tells Lori that he chose her as his therapist because she is a nobody in the Hollywood hierarchy.
So insulting.
I know. He does it to guarantee he won't run into any powerful colleagues in her waiting room. He insists on paying her in cash so there's no paper trail for his wife to find. And he refers to Lori as his emotional hooker.
He is abrasive, insulting, and meticulously designed to push people away.
So why doesn't Lori just kick him out?
Well, we have to look at the mechanics of that abrasion. John's hostility is a bodyguard
A bodyguard against what?
against his own pain. When a patient comes in acting like a jerk, the therapist knows that behavior is serving a vital survival function.
Huh.
If Lori were to just shatter his defense, if she looked at him and said, "Hey, John, you're the problem, you're alienating everyone you love because you're a bully," it would basically be clinical malpractice.
Because he would just break.
Exactly. You cannot destroy a defense mechanism without first building the scaffolding to replace it.
Yeah.
If you strip away the hostility, you leave the patient completely raw, exposed to the agony they're desperately trying to suppress.
Okay, I have to challenge this, though. Or at least ask the question that always bothers me about the concept of defense mechanisms.
Sure, go for it.
Do we subconsciously know what the real problem is when we walk into that room? Or are we genuinely, 100% fooling ourselves?
That's a great question.
Did Lori secretly know her breakdown wasn't just about boyfriend? Does a guy like John know deep in his gut that he's using anger to mask something else? Or is his conscious brain entirely hijacked by the illusion?
It is almost always a fractured state of awareness. It's a mix of compartmentalization and denial.
So we sort of know, but we don't.
Deep down, in the limbic system where our raw emotional memories are stored, we know. The
Yeah.
body knows.
Right.
But the prefrontal cortex, the conscious reasoning part of our brain, is working overtime to build a narrative wall. We desperately want help, which is why we show up to the therapist's office in the first place.
Because John keeps showing up.
Exactly. But we also desperately want to avoid the pain of the real issue. So we offer up the presenting problem as a sort of sacrificial lamb.
So it's like a negotiation.
A subconscious negotiation is basically, hey, fix my anger at slow drivers, or fix my outrage at my ex, but please, whatever you do not look behind the curtain.
And that brings us to the most humbling realization of this entire narrative, I think. We expect therapists, because of their immense training and their ability to see behind our curtains, to have their own lives perfectly sanitized.
But they don't. They really don't.
They are profoundly human.
The stigma around emotional struggle is immense, even and sometimes especially among mental health professionals.
Yeah, that part was eye-opening.
There is this powerful anecdote Gottlieb shares from the writer Andrew Solomon. He was attending a conference and met a married couple. During the course of the day, the husband pulled Solomon aside and confessed, in strict confidence, that he was taking antidepressants.
Okay.
And he begged Solomon not to tell his wife.
Wow.
But then later that exact same day, the wife pulled Solomon aside and confessed the exact same thing, begging him not to tell her husband.
They were hiding the exact same medication from each other, hiding it in the exact same house.
It's wild.
That is the physical manifestation of shame. We are so terrified of vulnerability that we will hide our humanity from the people closest to us.
Exactly. And in the therapeutic world, this dynamic is addressed through the concept of a parallel process.
Parallel process.
Yeah. Therapists are essentially mirrors, reflecting mirrors. They're required to undergo extensive therapy during their clinical training, but the best ones continue going throughout their entire careers.
Because they have to deal with our junk.
Partly yes, but also just because life happens. Worrying beneath all of their clinical expertise, their diagnostic manuals, and all their psychological theories is the undeniable biological fact that it is incredibly difficult to be a human being.
It really is.
Therapists suffer from compassion fatigue. They absorb the trauma of their patients every day. They need a space to decompress that cognitive load.
So Lori, completely shattered by this breakup, realizes she desperately needs her own therapist, but she runs into this logistical and ethical nightmare called dual relationships.
Oh yeah, the ethics of it are so strict.
Right. In the world of psychology, therapists are strictly forbidden from treating friends, colleagues, neighbors, or anyone in their social or professional orbit.
It has to be a totally separate, sanitized space to prevent bias.
And finding someone in Los Angeles where she personally knows half the clinical community proves incredibly difficult.
But she eventually secures a referral for a veteran psychologist named Wendell Bronson.
Enter Wendell.
Enter Wendell. And her initial sessions with him are just a stark, jarring contrast to her professional, put-together persona.
Because she just loses it.
She walks into his office, sits down on his couch, and just cries. And not a delicate, composed cry. She sobs for 45 minutes straight.
I mean, we have all had those moments where the dam breaks, but imagine the layered vulnerability of that moment for her.
Right, because she knows exactly what's happening mechanically.
Yes, she is an expert in emotional regulation. She knows the clinical terms for every single physiological response happening in her body, and yet she is utterly powerless to stop it. She is just falling apart.
And Wendell,
Hmm.
very astutely, doesn't just focus on the tears over boyfriend. He starts digging into a secondary crisis happening in her life.
The book?
The book. Lori's under contract to write a book about happiness, and the sheer act of trying to write it is making her clinically miserable.
Which is incredibly ironic, but this is a crucial pivot point in her psychological landscape. We have to look at her history here. Earlier in her career, Lori had written this viral article about modern parenting that generated a highly lucrative book deal offer.
But she turned it down.
She turned down that parenting book. She wanted to write something with deeper existential meaning. So she signed a contract for a book on happiness. But now she finds herself paralyzed, stuck writing a manuscript she actively hates purely to pay the bills, while totally ignoring the massive, flashing warning signs of her own life's trajectory.
Wendell gently points out that her paralysis isn't writer's block. It's avoidance.
Avoidance. Let's talk about avoidance as a mechanism, because it's so common.
Oh, we all do it.
Avoidance is essentially a highly effective short-term coping strategy where you cope by simply refusing to cope.
That's a great way to put it.
Lori is spending her nights going down these insane internet rabbit holes, Google stalking boyfriend's exes, looking at his social media.
Just obsessive.
Yeah, she's doing this to avoid sitting down at her computer to write the happiness book. And she is avoiding the happiness book because sitting down in the silence forces her to confront her own paralyzing uncertainty about her future, her career, and the choices she's made.
The neuroscience of that avoidance is fascinating, actually.
Oh, break that down for me.
When she Google stalks boyfriend, she is giving her brain these tiny, cheap hits of dopamine.
Which is the reward chemical, right?
Exactly. It's the neurochemical of seeking and reward. It keeps her distracted and slightly numbed. Writing the book, however, forces her into a state of introspection that spikes her cortisol, which is the stress hormone.
Because she hates the book.
Because it highlights the massive gap between the life she is currently living and the life she actually wants.
Wow.
And Wendell's approach here is just a masterclass in clinical restraint. He avoids a phenomenon known as ultracrepidarianism.
I'm sorry, you have to break that word down. Ultracrepidarianism.
It's a mouthful, and it's a wonderful term, though. It refers to the habit of giving opinions or advice on matters outside of one's own knowledge or competence.
Okay.
Patients constantly, desperately want their therapist to just hand them a roadmap.
Tell me what to do.
Exactly. Should I quit my job? Should I divorce my husband? Should I send this text?
Right.
But Wendell and Lori, in her own practice, actually refuses to give prescriptive advice. The goal of therapy is never advice.
See, I have to push back hard on this.
Go for it.
Because if I am paying a therapist hundreds of dollars an hour and I'm sitting there agonizing over a toxic boyfriend, why shouldn't they just tell me he's toxic?
Because if they tell you what to do, they are robbing you of the opportunity to build the neural pathways of self-trust.
But isn't withholding advice just a way to keep patients on the hook, like paying for more sessions?
No, the goal is to help the patient hear the quiet, terrifying questions they didn't even know they were asking themselves.
Okay, but specifically with Lori, before she became a therapist, she worked in Hollywood as a story editor for NBC.
Right, she worked on ER, I think.
Yeah, her entire job was sitting in writers' rooms, analyzing character arcs, spotting plot holes, and understanding character motivations.
She was literally a professional narrative editor.
Exactly. So if anyone has the training to spot a bad script, it's her. Doesn't that background make her uniquely qualified to spot her own narrative traps? Why is she so totally blind to her own storyline?
It's a great challenge, but it fundamentally misunderstands how the brain processes personal trauma versus external information.
Okay, explain.
It does not matter how skilled you are at analyzing the motivations of others. It is nearly impossible to read the label from inside the jar.
Read the label from inside the jar. I love that.
When you're inside the emotional experience, your default mode network, which is the part of the brain responsible for self-referential thoughts and ego preservation, is highly active.
So it's protecting her.
It is actively filtering out information that contradicts your self-image. When Lori analyzes a TV script, she has emotional distance. When she analyzes her own life, her defense mechanisms distort the lens. We all act as unreliable narrators of our own lives.
Let's really pull that apart. The unreliable narrator. In literature, it's a character whose telling of the story is compromised, right?
Yeah, you can't quite trust them.
But in therapy, patients don't usually walk into the room and purposely, maliciously lie. They just selectively edit the footage.
They leave out the bad parts.
They leave out the specific strands of the story that don't jibe with their preferred victimhood or their preferred heroism. They want the therapist to help them, yes, but they also desperately want the therapist to like them.
Oh, for sure.
They want to hide their shame.
Exactly. Human memory is not a video recording. It is a constant process of reconsolidation.
Reconsolidation.
Every time you recall a memory, your brain rewrites it slightly, usually shading it to protect your ego. Therapy is fundamentally a collaborative process of re-editing these stories.
So the therapist is a co-editor.
The therapist listens to the patient's narrative and, instead of accepting it as objective truth, starts looking for the negative space.
Yeah,
What is missing from this story?
that makes total sense.
One of the most poignant examples of this editing process in the book is Lori's patient, Rita.
Oh man, Rita's story is absolutely gutting.
It really is.
She is a 70-year-old woman who feels, with complete conviction, that her life is entirely over. She is totally estranged from her adult children because, when they were young, she failed to protect them from a highly abusive father.
The guilt she carries is immense.
She is so consumed by the weight of this regret and just the crushing loneliness of her current life that she makes a confession to Lori. She plans to commit suicide on her upcoming 70th birthday.
It's heartbreaking.
She genuinely feels that she has ruined every chance she ever had and that she fundamentally does not deserve to be alive.
Rita's narrative is a dirge. It is a closed loop of absolute hopelessness.
Just totally stuck.
But as Lori gently begins to edit the story with her, probing the rigid boundaries of Rita's self-loathing, a stunning psychological revelation emerges.
The envy.
Yes. Rita is holding on to her misery as a self-imposed prison sentence. She believes that if she allows herself to feel even a sliver of happiness, she is somehow getting away with a crime she committed against her children.
Like she has to punish herself forever.
Exactly. And even deeper than that, beneath the guilt, she harbors a hidden, terrifying envy toward those same children.
Because they have time.
She envies them because they have their whole lives ahead of them to heal and change, while her life feels definitively finished.
But the editing process starts to work. Slowly, Rita starts making these microscopic changes in her daily life.
Little steps.
Like a man who lives in her apartment building, Myron, kindly offers to make a website to showcase her artwork.
Which is huge for her.
It's a tiny connection, but it's a crack in the concrete wall of her prison. However, because intimacy terrifies her, she unfairly snaps at Myron in a parking lot over something totally trivial.
Her defense mechanism kicking in.
Right. But instead of retreating into her shame, she drafts an apology letter to him. And she brings the letter to Lori. At first, the letter is just a defensive screed. It's full of justifications, basically saying, "I'm sorry I yelled, but you made me do it."
Classic unreliable narrator.
But Lori helps her rewrite it. They edit out the defenses, line by line, until what remains is a genuine, terrifying expression of vulnerability.
And that biological shift from defense to vulnerability changes her entire brain chemistry. Rita experiences what it feels like to connect without armor.
And it saves her.
It literally saves her life. On her 70th birthday, instead of ending her life, she walks into Lori's office and brings Lori a present.
I cried at that part.
She learns that while she cannot change the facts of her past, she has complete agency over the narrative of her future.
That is so powerful. Now we see a totally different flavor of the unreliable narrator with another patient, Charlotte.
Oh, Charlotte is fascinating.
Charlotte is a 20-something woman who is struggling with binge drinking and a chronic pattern of hooking up with exactly the wrong guys.
Just a tornado of chaos.
She is so utterly consumed by shame over her behavior that she starts almost every single session by walking in, looking at Lori, and saying, "You're gonna kill me."
Charlotte is a classic case study in avoiding the thing that cannot be discussed.
A thing that cannot be discussed.
Yeah. She grew up in a highly chaotic, unpredictable household. As a result, her nervous system equates love with anxiety and instability. Peace literally feels dangerous to her.
Because peace is unfamiliar.
Exactly. So she actively avoids genuine intimacy by sleeping with her neighbor, a guy who explicitly told her to her face that he does not want a relationship.
So she knows he's unavailable.
She settles for these breadcrumbs of connection because it protects her from risking real vulnerability with someone who might actually love her.
And she uses the therapy itself as a substitute for real intimacy. This part blew my mind.
Oh, it's so clever on her part.
Charlotte purposefully leaves her sunglasses or her water bottle behind in Lori's office every single week. She does it so she has an excuse to come back.
Just a little anchor left behind.
She openly admits that she is addicted to therapy because it provides a simulation of intimacy that is perfectly safe. She can get deeply close to Lori, she can share her secrets, but she never has to fully commit or risk abandonment because the session is guaranteed to end in exactly 50 minutes.
This behavior perfectly illustrates a critical psychological framework developed by James Prochaska, the stages of change.
The stages of change. Walk us through that.
Change isn't an event, it's a process. You have pre-contemplation, where you don't even realize you have a problem.
Simple denial.
Then you move into the contemplation stage, which is exactly where Charlotte is trapped. In contemplation, people recognize they have a destructive pattern, but they relentlessly procrastinate to stave off actually changing it.
Why? If you know it's bad, why not change it?
Because of loss aversion. Humans are wired to prefer familiar misery over foreign happiness.
Wow. Familiar misery over foreign happiness.
Change, even incredibly positive change, involves a death. Charlotte has to let go of her familiar, chaotic coping mechanisms that honestly kept her alive in her childhood in order to find adult stability.
Lori talks beautifully about the profound difference between saying no and saying yes here. In modern pop psychology, we talk endlessly about setting boundaries, right? Learning to say no.
Which is very trendy right now.
And that is important, but sometimes saying no becomes a sophisticated cop-out. It's a way to avoid saying yes to life. Charlotte gets really good at saying no to the toxic neighbor eventually, but she is utterly terrified to say yes to trusting herself, to succeed in a healthy, reciprocal relationship.
That is where your Hollywood film editor analogy actually comes into play perfectly.
Oh, yeah.
The therapist acts as the master editor. They look at the raw footage of the patient's daily life and ask the hard structural questions. What material in the scene is extraneous? Is the protagonist just walking in circles?
Are we stuck on a loop?
Are we stuck listening to a static-ridden radio station like the "Everyone's life is better than mine" station, or the "I ruin everything I touch" station? The therapist doesn't write a new script for the patient. They help the patient recognize they have the power to change the channel.
Let's expand on that film editor idea. When an editor is in the cutting room, they can entirely change the genre of a movie just by what they choose to leave on the cutting room floor.
Absolutely.
If you take a tragic scene but cut to a shot of a character laughing, it becomes a dark comedy. Therapy is doing that with our memories. But once we start successfully editing the stories of our past, we inevitably crash headfirst into the unwritten, entirely unpredictable story of our future.
The great unknown.
And that brings us to the terrifying reality of uncertainty, grief, and the ultimate lack of control we have over our physical existence. This is where the book introduces Julie.
Julie's story.
And I have to warn you, if you haven't read the book, Julie's story will completely shatter you.
It is profoundly moving.
Tell them about Julie.
Julie is a vibrant, brilliant young university professor. She gets married, she goes on her honeymoon to Tahiti, and while she is there in absolute paradise, she notices a lump in her breast.
Just a nightmare.
She returns home, takes a test, and finds out she is pregnant. And in the exact same week, gets officially diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer.
It is the most unfair, cruel whiplash imaginable. The collision of ultimate life and ultimate mortality happening on the exact same day.
The universe can be so deeply random.
She has to navigate grueling cancer treatments while pregnant, which tragically, predictably, results in a miscarriage.
This is devastating.
But she fights through the absolute darkness of that loss. She beats the cancer. She gets a completely clean scan. She and her husband, Matt, go on a celebratory hot air balloon ride to mark the rest of their lives beginning.
She really thinks she's out of the woods.
She genuinely thinks she has survived the storm. But then a routine follow-up scan shows that a different, incredibly rare form of cancer has returned. And this time the oncologist tells her it is terminal.
The psychology of how Julie handles this is remarkable.
How so?
She specifically seeks out Lori as a therapist because she finds out Lori is not a specialized cancer therapist.
Yeah, one that's special too.
Julie does not want to be treated like a dying patient. She wants to be treated like a living person who happens to be dying. She tells Lori how utterly exhausted she is by the toxic positivity of the mainstream cancer community.
The pink ribbons.
The relentless pink ribbons, the immense pressure to be a brave cancer warrior.
Toxic positivity is such an interesting cultural defense mechanism. When people force relentless optimism on someone who is suffering, telling them, everything happens for a reason or just stay positive, they aren't actually trying to comfort the sick person.
No, not at all.
They are trying to soothe their own existential terror. They are trying to convince themselves that if they just maintain a good attitude, bad things won't happen to them.
That is deeply rooted in terror management theory.
Terror management theory.
Yes, society pushes away the reality of death
Yeah.
because the anxiety of mortality is just too immense to carry daily. But Julie refuses to play that game. She wants to be angry. She wants to be sad. She wants authentic emotion.
Which leads to this incredibly dark, hilarious, and deeply human moment in the book. Lori is going through her own agonizing breakup with boyfriend, and she is so distracted and sleep-deprived that she accidentally goes to work wearing a pajama top.
The shirt.
And not just any pajama top. It has the words "Namaste" in bed printed across the front.
It's so bad.
She only realizes it right as Julie, her terminally ill patient, walks into the office. Lori is mortified.
As any professional would be.
But instead of being offended by the perceived lack of professionalism, Julie looks at the shirt and bursts into uncontrollable, genuine laughter. It's the first time she has truly laughed in weeks. They bond instantly over their mutual hatred for a woman in Julie's support group who relentlessly insists that positive thinking and yoga can cure terminal cancer.
That moment of shared, imperfect humanity breaks right through the clinical sterility of the therapy room.
It really does.
As Julie confronts the reality of her shorting timeline, Lori helps her navigate the impossible logistics of dying young. One of the most heartbreaking and beautiful things Julie does is write a literal dating profile for her husband, Matt.
Oh, God, that part.
She knows he will outlive her, and she wants to help him find his next wife after she is gone. She writes this achingly beautiful, compassionate letter, acknowledging that he will have, as she calls them, grief girlfriends.
Grief girlfriends.
Women he dates just to cope with the immediate pain before he finds the right long-term person. And she gives him her full, unconditional blessing to love again.
It's stunning. It's the ultimate act of self-transcendence. And watching Julie face impending death profoundly shifts how Lori views her own life and her own breakup.
Because it puts it all in perspective.
Wendell gives Lori a massive paradigm shift here. He tells her that she isn't just mourning the loss of boyfriend in the present moment. She is mourning the loss of her future.
The unlived future.
When a relationship ends suddenly, the present falls apart, yes. But the entire imagined future we associated with that person, the vacations, the shared retirement, the inside jokes that will never happen, vanishes into thin air. We grieve the ghost of the future.
This ties perfectly into a famous, highly regarded essay by Emily Pearl Kingsley called Welcome to Holland.
Oh, I've heard of this.
The metaphor goes like this. You spend your entire life planning a fabulous, highly anticipated trip to Italy. You learn Italian phrases, you buy the guidebooks, you plan out the museums you will visit.
Right.
But when your plane finally lands, the flight attendant gets on the intercom and says, "Welcome to Holland."
Wait, what?
You are completely shocked. You say, "Wait, I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy." But the flight plan changed. You are in Holland. And you are faced with a stark psychological choice.
Right.
You can spend the rest of your life bitterly mourning the fact that you never got to see Italy. Or you can step outside the airport, look around, and notice that Holland has windmills. And Holland has beautiful tulips.
Lori has to accept that her plane has landed in Holland. Her future isn't the one she meticulously planned with boyfriend. And Julie's future certainly isn't the one she planned when she got married.
Not at all.
But as Gottlieb writes, change and loss travel together. You cannot have one without the other. Every new beginning requires the death of an old state of being.
This is exactly where the profound work of Viktor Frankl becomes the anchor of the therapeutic process.
Viktor Frankl.
Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor who wrote the seminal book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Incredible book.
He developed a school of psychology called logotherapy, which is based on the premise that the primary human drive is not pleasure, as Freud suggested, but the search for meaning. Frankl famously wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom."
I want you, the listener, to really sit with that. Between stimulus and response, there is a space.
It's so vital.
Neurologically, there is a microsecond between the physical arousal of an event the text message breaking up with you, the doctor handing you the scan, and the cognitive appraisal where you decide what that event means.
That space is your entire agency.
You cannot control the stimulus. You cannot control the traumatic childhood, the terminal diagnosis, or the partner leaving. But you have absolute sovereign power over the response. And I love how Lori connects this newfound perspective to the concept of emotional presbyopia.
Presbyopia is the physiological farsightedness that naturally occurs as the lenses in our eyes age.
It's the reason people in their 40s suddenly have to hold a restaurant menu at arm's length just to read the font.
Okay, exactly.
And emotional presbyopia is what happens as we age emotionally and conceptually get closer to our own mortality. We naturally pull back the lens.
We see the big picture.
The prefrontal cortex starts to override the panic of the amygdala. We stop obsessing over the microscopic, petty details that used to entirely consume our days, the traffic jams, the slight from a coworker, and we focus on the macro.
We focus on what actually matters.
Sitting in a room week after week with a dying patient like Julie forces Lori to develop emotional presbyopia at lightning speed.
And this brings us to the final, most dynamic realization of the book.
Let's hear it.
All of these grand, sweeping theoretical themes, grief, narrative editing, terror management theory, mortality, the space between stimulus and response, they don't just exist as abstract philosophical concepts.
They aren't just in textbooks.
They are acted out, physically and emotionally, in real time, right inside the four walls of the therapy room. The therapy room is not an isolated laboratory. It is a pressurized microcosm of real life.
Which takes us right back to John, our favorite abrasive, hostile Hollywood producer.
Poor John.
Earlier, we talked about how patients use defenses, but therapists also look at how patients act out their family of origin.
Right. People rarely just sit down and logically explain their childhood trauma to you.
That'd be too easy.
Instead, they perform it for you. They have a repertoire of relational themes. If John is a condescending jerk to Lori in the safety of her office, it is a mathematical certainty that he is a condescending jerk to his wife Margot in their living room.
This brings up one of the most crucial diagnostic tools a therapist possesses, countertransference.
Countertransference is huge.
Transference is when a patient projects their feelings about a past figure onto the therapist, right?
Yes.
Countertransference is the therapist's emotional, internal reaction to the patient. And thanks to things like mirror neurons and projective identification, it is incredibly powerful.
It's vital clinical data.
If a therapist feels chronically annoyed, bored, or dismissed by a patient, that is not just a personal failing on the therapist's part. It means everyone else in that patient's real life probably feels the exact same way.
Lori's intense frustration with John helps her map the exact emotional topography of what Margot is dealing with at home.
But then the walls finally come down. After months of tolerating his abuse, Lori uncovers the absolutely heartbreaking truth beneath John's idiot's defense. It's so sad. When John was a little boy, his mother died suddenly in a horrific car crash.
So he learned early that love equals sudden, violent abandonment.
Exactly. And then, years later, as an adult, the ultimate unthinkable tragedy strikes his own family. His young son, Gabe, dies in a tragic accident.
It is a devastating revelation that completely recontextualizes his entire personality.
Everything makes sense now.
John has been wrapping himself in this rigid, hostile, false self, aggressively demanding perfection from the world, screaming at the idiots, because he is desperately, subconsciously trying to control an entirely uncontrollable universe.
A universe that arbitrarily took both his mother and his son.
If everyone else just followed the rules perfectly, maybe nobody else would die.
There is this profound, breathless moment in one of their sessions. John is doing his usual routine, deflecting, complaining about something incredibly trivial, and then a heavy, uncomfortably long silence falls over the room.
Silence is so loud in therapy.
John gets immediately agitated. He starts counting out loud. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. He absolutely cannot tolerate the silence. He hates it.
Because silence in therapy is incredibly potent. It is not just the absence of noise. Gottlieb describes it as emptying the trash.
Emptying the trash.
When a patient is forced to stop throwing meaningless words into the void to fill the space, the cognitive load drops, the distractions vanish, and the real, raw, unprocessed emotions that the limbic system has been holding on to inevitably rise to the surface.
Because there's nowhere else for them to go.
Silence is the space where the defense mechanisms starve.
And in that silence, John finally breaks. He starts crying. But he's crying over the fact that his living daughter didn't get the last Kobe Bryant jersey in her size at the store.
He is weeping uncontrollably over a piece of clothing.
But obviously he's not crying about the jersey. The jersey is a safe proxy. It is a socially acceptable conduit for his unbearable, suffocating grief over Gabe. He finally, after months of posturing, lets Lori see the agonizing depths of his pain.
And this breakthrough allows them to do the real work, practicing rupture and repair.
Rupture and repair.
This is rooted in attachment theory. Intimacy guarantees that you will get hurt. If you sign up for love, you are signing up for the inevitability of pain and misunderstanding.
It's unavoidable.
But if you practice surviving ruptures, arguments, letdowns, moments of anger, and, more importantly, repairing them afterward, you learn a vital neurological lesson. A fight does not mean the end of the world.
Anger does not mean the end of love.
John learns how to rupture and repair in the absolute safety of a therapy room with Lori. He learns that he can show his messy, grieving self and Lori will not abandon him, which then allows him to take that newly acquired skill home and use it with his wife, Margot.
Okay, speaking of Margot, we have to talk about the greatest plot twist in the entire book.
Oh my goodness, yes.
John has been complaining for weeks and weeks about Margot's quote-unquote idiot therapist. He thinks this unseen therapist is filling Margot's head with psychobabble and nonsense.
He hates this guy.
Finally, in an offhand comment, John drops the therapist's name. It's Wendell Bronson.
It is an incredible, almost unbelievable moment of synchronicity.
Lori's jaw practically hits the floor. She realizes that her patient's wife is seeing her therapist.
Poor Wendell.
John is complaining about the exact same man Lori goes to cry to every single week. It is the perfect, hilarious, almost cosmic embodiment of the messy, interconnected, mirrors-reflecting, mirrors reality of the human experience.
It's brilliant because it forces Lori to violently confront the limits of her own perspective.
Right, because she only knew John's version.
She has to seek outside clinical consultation to ensure her work with John isn't ethically compromised by this revelation, of course. But structurally, it beautifully illustrates that we only ever have one half of the story. We are all blind men touching different parts of the elephant, assuming we know what the whole animal looks like.
As the book comes to a close, Lori reflects on the ultimate lesson she learns from sitting on Wendell's couch, the lesson that synthesizes her journey as both a healer and a patient. Wendell tells her, quite simply, nobody is going to save you.
That's a hard truth.
The therapy room is not a rescue helicopter swooping in to airlift you out of your misery. It is a training ground.
Gottlieb uses a fantastic sports analogy to bring this home. Therapy is like shooting baskets against a backboard in an empty gym.
Oh, I like that.
You are practicing your form, you are adjusting your grip, you are building the essential muscle memory of emotional regulation. But eventually the buzzer sounds.
You have to play the game.
You have to leave the safety of the empty gym and go play in an actual game with real defenders and unpredictable variables. You have to take the self-awareness, the newly repaired narratives, and the tolerance for uncertainty out into the chaos of the real world.
So what does this all mean for us? Why does maybe you should talk to someone matter so much? And who ultimately benefits from picking it up? For me, this book completely demystifies the therapeutic process.
100%.
It rips down that clinical sterile veil that separates the quote-unquote sick patient from the healthy doctor and shows the raw, beating, bleeding human heart on both sides of the couch.
It radically normalizes the struggle of simply being human.
Mm.
It champions the concept of self-compassion, which is accepting that you are human, flawed, and worthy of grace over the cultural obsession with self-esteem, which is a rigid, exhausting system of constantly judging whether you are good or bad, a winner or a loser.
It's so exhausting to keep score like that.
Anyone who feels stuck in a repetitive loop, anyone navigating the impossible waters of grief, or anyone who just wants to understand the people they love a little better will find immense practical value in these pages.
It reminds us that we are absolutely not alone in our messy, complicated lives. Before we wrap up today, if you love this deep dive and want to continue growing and exploring life-changing literature with us, please hit that subscribe button so you never miss our upcoming deep dives on the Book Nook.
We truly love building this community of curious minds with you.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.
We started with Carl Jung. Who looks inside, awakes.
Looking inside is terrifying. You might find a check engine light glaring back at you, warning you of a truth you aren't ready to face. But if you have the courage to pop the hood, To sit in the unbearable silence and empty the trash, you just might find the freedom to rewrite your own story. And I'll leave you with this final thought to mull over. In an increasingly automated, algorithm-driven world that profits off our endless distraction, the radical act of paying someone just to sit in silence with you, face to face, might be the last remaining sanctuary for the human soul. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.